Welcome to #ShareAStory. My name is Mary and this story is called Asmund and Signy, an Icelandic tale from Andrew Lang's fairy books. Long, long ago, in the days where fairies, witches, giants and ogres still roamed the earth, there was a king who resided over the great and beautiful country. He was married to a wife who he dearly loved, and they had 2 promising children, a son named Asmund and a daughter who was named Signy. The king and the queen were very anxious to bring their children up well, and the young prince and the young princess were taught everything likely to make them clever and accomplished. They lived at home in their father's palace, and he spared no expense to make their lives very happy. Prince Asmund dearly loved all outdoor sports and anything with an open-air life. From his earliest childhood, he had longed to live entirely in the forest close by. After many arguments, he succeeded in persuading the king to give him 2 giant oak trees of his very own. "Now," he said to his sister, "I will have the trees hollowed out, and I will make rooms in them and furnish them so I will be able to live out in the forest." "Oh, Asmund!" exclaimed Signy, "that is a delightful idea. Oh, do let me come true and live in one of your trees. I'll bring all my pretty things and my ornaments. And anyway, the trees are so close, I think we should be quite safe in them." Asmund, who was very fond of his sister, agreed, and they had a very happy time together, carrying all over their pet treasures and Signy's jewels and ornaments, and arranging them in the little rooms inside the trees. Unfortunately, sadder days were to come. A war broke out, and the king had to lead his army against their enemy. During his absence, the queen fell ill, and after some time, she died. And to the great grief of her children, they made up their minds to live all together for a time in the trees. And for this purpose, they had enough provisions to last them a year. Now, I must tell you that in another country long off, there resided a king who had an only son named Ring. Prince Ring had heard so much about the beauty and the goodness of Princess Signy that he was determined to marry her, if possible. So he begged his father to let him have a ship for the voyage, and he set sail with a favourable wind, and after a time landed in the country where Signy lived. The prince lost no time in setting out for the royal palace, and on his way he met the most wonderfully lovely woman that he felt he's never seen such beauty in his life. He stopped her and asked her who she was. "I am Signy, the king's daughter," was the reply. Then the prince inquired why was she wandering all by herself, and she told him that since her mother's death, she was so sad that whilst her father was away, she preferred to be alone. Ring was quite deceived by her, and he never guessed that this woman was not Princess Signy at all, but was in fact a strong, gigantic, wicked witch bent on deceiving him under her beautiful shape. He confided to her that he had travelled all this way from his own country for her sake, and having fallen in love with the accounts he heard of her beauty, he, Prince Ring, asked her there and then to be his wife. The witch listened to all that he said, much pleased, and accepted the offer. But she begged him to return to his ship for a little while, as she wished to go some way further into the forest, and she promised to join him later on. Prince Ring did as she said, and he went back to the ship to wait, while she walked on to the forest until she reached the 2 oak trees. Here she resumed her own gigantic shape and tore up the trees by their roots. She threw one over the back, and she held the other to her breast, and she carried them down to the shore and waded them onto the ship. She took care not to be noticed as she reached the ship, and directly got on board once she changed to her former lovely appearance. and she told the prince that her luggage was now all on board and they needed to wait for nothing more. The prince gave orders to set sail at once, and after a fine voyage they landed in his own country, where the prince and his only sister received him with the greatest joy and affection. The false Signy was also welcomed. A beautiful house was ready for her, and Prince Ring had the 2 oak trees placed in their garden just in front of the windows, so she might have the pleasure of seeing them constantly. He often went to visit the witch, who he believed to be Prince Signy, and one day he asked, "Do you think we might be married before long?" "Yes," she replied, "most please. I'm quite ready to marry you whenever you like." "Then," replied Ring, "let us decide on this day fortnight, and see, I've brought you some stuff to make your own wedding dress of." So he gave her a large piece of the most beautiful brocade, all woven with golden threads and embroidered with pearls and other jewels. The prince had hardly left her before the witch returned to her former shape and tore around the room, raging and storming and flinging the beautiful silk on the floor. "What was she to do with such things?" she roared. "She does not know how to sew or make clothes, and she was sure to die of starvation into the bargain if her brother Ironhead did not come soon and bring her raw meat and bones, for she rarely could eat anything else." As she was raving and roaring in this frantic manner, the floor suddenly opened and a huge rose came up, a huge giant, carrying a great chest in his arms. The witch was so enchanted by this sight that she eagerly helped her brother sit down and opened the chest, which was made of all the ghastly food she had been longing for. The horrid pair sat to greedily devour it all, and when the chest was quite empty, the giant put it on his shoulders and descended, disappearing just as he had come, without leaving any trace of his visit. But his sister did not stay quiet for long, and she began to tore and pull at the rich brocade as she wished to destroy it, stomping and screaming angrily. Now, all of this time, Prince Asmund and his sister just sat in the trees outside the window and saw everything that was going on. "Dear Signy," asked Asmund, "do try to get a hold of that brocade and make the clothes yourself, for really we should have no rest day or night with such a noise." "I will try," said Princess Signy. "It won't be an easy matter, but it is worth taking some time to just have a little peace." So she watched for an opportunity and managed to carry off the brocade for the first time when the witch left the room. Then she sat to work, cutting it out and sewing as best as she could, and by the end of 6 days she had turned it all into an elegant robe with a long train and mantle. When she was finished, she climbed to the top of her tree and began to throw the clothes from a table through the open window. Now, how delighted the witch was when she found all the clothes finished! The next time Prince Ring came to see her, she gave them to him, and he paid her many compliments on her skillful work, after which he took leave of leaving her in the most friendly manner. But he had barely left the house when the witch began to rage furiously as ever, and never stopped until her brother Ironhead appeared. When Asmund saw all these wild doings from the tree, he could no longer keep silent. He went to Prince Ring and said, "Do come with me and see the strange things that are happening in the new princess's room." The prince was not a little surprised, but he agreed and hid himself with Asmund behind a panel of the room, from which they could see all that was happening through a little slit. The witch was raging and roaring as usual, and she said to her brother, "Once I'm married to the king's son, I better be off than now. I shall take all that pack of courtiers put to death, and shall send for all my relatives to come and live here instead. I fancy the giants will enjoy themselves very much with me and my husband." When Prince Ring heard this, he fell into such a rage that he ordered the house to be set on fire. And it was burnt to the ground with the witch and her brother in it. Asmund then told the prince about the 2 oak trees and took him to see them. The prince was astonished at them and at all their contents, but most of all at the extreme beauty of the real Princess Signy. He fell in love with her at once and entreated her to marry him, where, after a time, she did. Asmund, on his side, asked for the hand of Prince Ring's sister, which was gladly granted, and a double wedding was celebrated with great rejoicings. And after all this, Prince Asmund and his bride returned to their country to live with the king, his father. The 2 couples often met and lived happily for many, many years. And that, everyone, is the end of our story. I hope you enjoyed #ShareAStory from Roundabout Dramatherapy. If you'd like to make a donation to support the work of Roundabout, we would be very grateful for your support. A small gift makes a big difference to all the children and adults they support. Thank you. Bye!